Okay, here is where things get interesting. 2 years ago, as part of a lawsuit against the Biden administration for censoring COVID-related speech, Fauci sat for a lengthy deposition and answered questions about many topics, including for gain-of-function research. You might remember I did a radar on this 2 years ago. Here was the key part. Fauci was asked whether he recalled if there was a legal exception regarding the pause on gain-of-function research from 2014. Here's what he said in response, and I'm quoting directly from his deposition. He affirmed there was such an exception. Quote, "Yeah, the deliberations at the time, based on the need to continue certain critical research, that an exception clause was put in saying that under special circumstances," and I'll read it so that you get an understanding, "an exception from the pause may be obtained if the head of a U.S. government funding agency determines that the research is urgently needed to protect the public health or national security," end quote. Fauci was then asked whether he ever invoked that exception, since he was the head of just such a funding agency. Fauci replied, quote, "As I recall, exceptions were given to a couple of experiments," end quote. Fauci went on to say he did not remember specifically signing off on the exceptions, and that it may have been done by his deputies rather than by him. The papers might have crossed his desk. He can't quite remember. Fauci's also sparred very publicly with Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who has accused the doctor of making misleading testimony before Congress about whether research he funded met the definition of gain-of-function research, which is, of course, a potentially criminal issue. Okay, keep all that in mind. The text of Biden's pardon for Fauci from yesterday states that he is being pardoned for any and all offenses he may have committed or taken part in as director of the National Institutes for Allergies and Infectious Diseases, as a member of the White House Task Force on COVID, or as chief medical advisor to the president. The pardon also contains a note on the time period it covers. This is the key fact. Note that the pardon is not confined to the time period of the pandemic when Fauci was the COVID advisor, say January 1st, 2020. It's also not backdated to encompass Fauci's entire time as the head of that institution, which stretches back to 1984. So let's be clear on this. It's neither super narrow, i.e. just covering COVID, nor is it super broad, i.e. the whole time that he's the country's top medical guy. The pardon is backdated to encompass a time period that begins January 1st, 2014.